put it in a Rasta life. All we have is genuine faith that leads us to Zion gate. I love righteousness, where Selassie rests his head. Humble children bawling out, oh what a battery. You know Sheila, big up yourself, King Selassie, I bless it from here to your toe. Sheila Ryan, big up yourself, King Selassie, I bless it. We have the Asian current, we have the roots and culture. Tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend. Niger, the organizer, Sheila Ryan, forward.
Greetings and welcome to Ancient Current Rastafari Roots and Culture. Today I have a very special guest, Jamie from Kibir La Amlak, founder of Before Zero Records, a videographer, a graphic designer, and also an experience, a live dub experience, studio and sound system. Welcome to Ancient Current, Jamie. Blessed love.
Blessed love, Rastafari. I give thanks for inviting me onto your Ancient Current Rastafari YouTube channel.
Yes, I give thanks. So can you start things out with just talking about who you are and what you do?
Well, I mean, yeah, you said it in the introduction. I think first and foremost, music is really my speciality. I'm a producer, and I have run various sound systems throughout the years and run a record label, as you outlined. Was a videographer, designer, and I guess who I am is trying to unify all of those disciplines with a strong backbone of Rastafari in all of the works, wherever possible, to the best of my ability.
Thank you. So I see Kibir La Amlak as all of these things that I mentioned in the introduction, as well as that you mentioned. I also see this experience and person as a wizard of mixing up sound, sight, and power of the people. And so if you would be willing to share from For the Kingdom some footage off your YouTube channel, I would be grateful to share with the audience what this actually is, what's happening, what we see come through you.
Dancing from the beginning to the ending. Rastafari universal healing. Chanting and dancing from the beginning to the ending. One other confession, living with passion, not for no fashion, not for no nation, but for your kingdom is for redemption, is for construction, for your elevation, blessed instruction out of your kingdom, not an opinion, just a direction, for concentration, holy correction, your contemplation for my
Just amazing. Just truly amazing. And in the video footages I see of this sort of recording, you're always out in the sweetness of Mother Nature. And I'm curious, do you go to these spots with a visual in mind?
Yeah, I mean, those videos in particular was kind of my response to preparing myself to go back into the kind of touring life after the enforced break that we all had due to the COVID.
Okay.
And I, for one, wasn't like you know, when the restrictions started to ease up and things, I wasn't really sort of feeling this sort of the vibe that I felt, you know. It was like there seemed to be a sort of strong current of people wanting to just act like what had just happened hadn't happened, and that things could just go back to normal. And I just didn't feel wholly able to participate in that. And I needed to kind of come back in a way to what I loved and, you know, sort of perform, for want of a better word, you know, go through the act, this sort of alchemical process that I feel that the sort of live dub experience is. I needed to go through it over and over again, away from people, away from the various, you know, nightclub type of settings that I might be asked to go and, you know, carry forth those works in. And the best way that I came up with to do that was in the forest, in nature. And that's kind of how that came to be. And then it was also, you know, I very much thought about how I could get everything that I use when I do what I do into a rucksack, or like a kind of custom designed sort of hiking bag, power it on batteries, and then set off into the forest to do that.
Epic.
And I never knew where I was going, and I never knew what track I would mix when I got there.
Okay.
So there's a degree of sort of spontaneity in all of it. And it's not entirely evident in the clip we just saw, but that rock that I'm perched upon is probably about 3.5 meters high, with little more space on the top of it than there was, you know, enough just for me to sort of sit down and set up. So there was about half an hour before I started that clip where I was, you know, trying to figure out how to climb up on the rock, get the stuff up there and set up on top of there without falling off, because I was kind of on my own in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
So yeah, that, and, you know, at the same time, obviously, you know, I filmed it all because I needed to reinstate myself back into the kind of international availability to go forward and travel and share these works, but do it from a place of feeling really prepared, like I had, you know. So there was a degree like it was hot, and my bag, by the time I had the equipment and the batteries, was extremely heavy. And I was hiking, like I say, and, you know, some of these I'm climbing up kind of quite substantial mountains and hills and cutting through quite dense forest. So there was a sort of like a metaphysical process in it as well. You know, I had to undergo quite a physically taxing exercise before setting up, and then sanctifying the space and burning the incense and making an offering and saying my prayer, and then hitting record and doing what happened. And that one in particular, I remember, is about 14 minutes long or something, and it's the first take. It was the only take. It's uploaded literally as it happened, and I pressed stop, and you know, that was that.
Wow. So are you recording it with a drone? Is that what's happening?
No, it also kind of coincided with, you know, different bits of technology that I utilized, and it's like a 360-degree camera that's quite small. You know, it's little bigger than this kind of remote, and quite uninvasive. It sits there, I don't have to pay attention to it, and it allows me to put all this movement in post to make it visually appealing to watch. But actually in the moment, I'm not particularly conscious of the fact that there's a camera there. And also there's particular headphones that I'm using that are very high quality, but they're open backed. So I can still hear the birds, I can still hear animals.
Wow.
I have very good studio quality sound, And I'm actually wearing a vest in that video from a company called Subpack that make a vest that you wear that vibrates it vibrates the low frequencies sort of directly into your body. So I'm also having a very tangible sort of almost sound system like experience.
Incredible.
Whilst doing it, whilst being able to hear the forest, whilst from the outside you can barely hear me.
So incredible. And that's what I see. It is alchemy, like real true alchemy. And I'm so glad to hear about this experience too, because you know, you see it, but you don't really know what is happening on the inside, but you can tell it's very deeply grounded and spiritual and intense. So it's interesting about the headphones open back. I like that you can still be hearing Mother Nature, because that is something that you are bringing through. And the backpack, you know, that's one thing that I love, is to be in a situation where I can feel the music so deeply go through me. And
Exactly.
it's so powerful. So it's neat to hear about all this. Thank you. So can you give a little history on your involvement with dub sound systems?
Yeah, I mean, it's the single most sort of continuous activity in my life. I think I came into it at a very young age, and I was immediately drawn and struck and impacted by the phenomena, and I had very little intellectual understanding of what I was bearing witness to, you know, sort of physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. And it just sort of formed, it completed the picture for me. I was already aware of the music. I already had some records that I loved dearly. And that kind of put the records into a context that really showed me the power of this music. And then it kind of formed the kind of moral and ethical compass and framework that shaped my entire life.
Beautiful.
And, you know, I think I discovered sound system when I was 10, and I started building one by the time I was 12.
Oh, that's some years to build things up. I mean, you can tell by seeing, you know, your social media posts, you can tell that this is nothing new to you, that it's deeply a part of your life. And so what artists or other producers have been influential for you on your trad?
Well, I was definitely blessed to have a good mentor come into my life, who is sadly no longer with us, but he was one of the UK sound system builders and a producer by the name of Reggae. And he kind of took me under his wing quite early and showed me a lot of things about actually building the cabinets to make a sound system, but also production techniques in the studio and music theory. And so that was a sort of very tangible sort of mentor-student type of relationship. But the first sound system that I ever saw was Jashaka. And that definitely set the tone for me to, you know, later sort of, I guess when I started to like intellectually process what it was, I realized that it was a very ancient ceremonial ritualistic gathering that I had been blessed to enter into and be blessed to, you know, have that as a sort of central pillar in my life.
Blessed. Can you share what Kibir la Amlak means?
Kibir la Amlak is an Amharic term which means glory to the Creator, or glory to the Most High.
Blessed. And what is the live show? What is your live show?
The live show is this kind of culmination of my life's work in a way, because it's, in my opinion, the sort of perfect balance between sound system, studio, and kind of live performance, for want of a better word. And so I take all of my discography and I have it all laid out in stems, sort of each instrument on each channel, and it's loaded into the computer, and then I have a series of controllers that I use to mix that live. And I kind of do that with the energy and with the foundation of as a sound system selector. And then I can dynamically share that with the people that gather around to participate in that sharing. And I often let the people know that come to take part in the live dub experience that this is as much about everyone in the space and the space as it is about me, because I try my best to just be a vessel and dynamically respond to the energy in the space as I feel it. So I become, in essence, a conduit to shape the music according to the energy of the room. And that way, for me, it feels like the most kind of inclusive and immersive way for me to try to orchestrate the gathering.
That's so beautiful. I love hearing you describe that, because I have been at shows, specifically midnight, but also recently, Perfect. I was at a show and I felt like the whole show was specifically catered for each and every individual there in a way that you could feel it as invasive, because it's like, wow, that really hit home, but yet it's so very beautiful and unifying. There's so much unity involved with that, because people who come to these shows they're all being called for one way or another, and the person in your position to have the ability to open themselves up to this crowd of people to cater a show to the vibration is so very powerful and beautiful. So I give thanks for that, and that, you know, that knowledge and understanding that you have that capacity and that that's what you're doing. It's so dope. So tell me, what composes the spiritual essence of a Rastafarian reggae sound system experience?
Well, that's a big question that I've been trying to see if I could find a way to articulate that with language recently. I recently gave a talk explicitly just on that subject, and it was a real journey for me to volunteer myself to give the talk and then try to figure out how to articulate it, because it's paradoxical to try to put something like that into words, I think. But what I realized that I had always known instinctually, as I started to try to, you know, do the research and think about how to articulate that, was that what the factors that make it a kind of spiritual gathering are things that are paralleled in almost all gatherings that have a spiritual nature, as far as I can see, cross-culturally from the dawning of time. The thing that's particularly unique about the Rastafari sound system gathering is, I feel like, as far as I can see, it's the first time that recorded music has been used ceremonially. And from what I can see, that seems to be evident is it was the sound system gatherings in Jamaica in their inception, the sort of inherent need for the Africans in Jamaica that had been forcibly removed from their motherland. The spirit of their traditional rites, rituals, and practices was so strong, it found its way into the way that recorded music was being A, recorded and composed, but then B, played back and reproduced using electrical components, speakers and amplifiers and so forth. And the ways that the sound system was set up that were distinctly different from, like if you go to a live stage show, you know, you have the band on stage, then you have the PA either side of the stage playing music outwards to the audience, then you have stage monitors playing music back to the band. So immediately there's like a sonic disconnect between the musicians and the audience. Whereas sound system now, the speakers were set up around, which means that the people playing the sound and the people gathering to listen to the sound are all immersed in the same sonic landscape. And then it automatically creates this gathering in around, which seems to be the way that we have gathered since the dawning of time. And then the need to reproduce the low frequencies in a way that it becomes an actual tactile, felt, tangible experience of those low frequencies in the body is something that, as far as I can see, that reggae sound system pioneered. It pushed the equipment, it adapted and modified and pushed the equipment to the edge of the boundary to make that happen, that in a way that it hadn't happened. And that seems to be, to me, rooted in the drum, and particularly in, you know, the Nyabingi drum, which is a kind of inspired by the Buru people, which, as far as, you know, historians can see, is a direct descendant of the Ashanti tribe and the Ashanti drum practices. So those components also, in combination with the music and also in combination with the setting, I think is what has given this Rastafari sound system a strong spiritual backbone.
It's so very simple, but so mind-blowing and complex at the same time. Can you talk about why it's important to keep the spiritual aspect of Rastafari in dub?
Well, I think, you know, there's a degree of it that's important because I want to make the case that bass is a cultural artifact of Rastafari. I mean, you can read about things like the history of the subwoofer, and it's so obvious that without that sound system phenomenon in Jamaica, it would never have actually become, you know, it's instructed the way that recorded music is reproduced. And so it's important from one perspective of just giving credit where credit is due. And I'm not you know, I specifically emphasize Rastafari sound system, but I'm in full awareness that not all sound systems are Rastafari sound systems and not all reggae is. of a Rastafari persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems undeniable that when Rastafari is part of it, it's that particular brand of that experience that has spread to all four corners of the globe.
Yes.
Reggae music was reggae music, but when reggae music and Rastafari came together in a synergy, Bob Marley and the Wailers took that to all four corners of the globe.
Yeah, man.
And when sound system came to the UK with the Windrush immigration from Jamaica in the 50s, it was the sound systems that were playing Rastafari music and setting up in this ceremonial way that also have inspired sound system to spread to all four corners of the globe. And this European reggae sound system phenomena that we see, and it spread to South America and Asia and India and Japan and all over the place, really seems to have at its core the blueprint of the Rastafari sound system pioneers. So I think it's important from that perspective that I would like to see all of the history books that talk about the trajectory of electronic music, the trajectory of what they've deemed now bass culture, and the trajectory of the manufacturing of audio reproduction equipment.
Yeah.
Rastafari is really a central pillar to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important from that perspective of credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's important from the perspective of, this was always traditionally something countercultural.
Mm-hmm.
And when the culture is going so wayward as it is today, with all of these confusions that are becoming so prevalent, it's so important to have something countercultural as a place for people to go and have an alternative experience and be awakened into an alternative way to view themselves, to view history, to get exposed to history that has been swept under the carpet, to get exposed to a lifestyle that has been swept under the carpet, and to understand themselves in the context of this judgment that we find ourselves in. And that can only happen if it maintains its spiritual component, if it descends into a debaucherous, hedonistic lifestyle like so many musics are, then those things are not compatible. They can't coexist because they oppose each other so ferociously.
Can you share about the song "My Father's People" with is it Maccabee?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that song, and also there's some reading material with that as well.
Yeah, it's all the same works in a way. That song was it was a song to the inception of the song was to, when it comes to His Imperial Majesty, there's so much of the story that has never been told, and there's so much of it that's swept under the carpet, and there's such a concerted effort made to reduce things to individual components. But the magnitude of Haile Selassie's work is so vast. There is almost no reason for anyone with any interest in history to not know about the works of His Majesty. And so that song, in a way, was a song to place His Majesty within the context of all of the other Pan-African leaders that he had assembled at the first summit of the Organization of African Unity, to try to show the magnitude of him as a Pan-African leader, in a way to sort of, you know, because I think he's sort of like, people say, oh, he's like Haile Selassie is, you know, just like this to the people, to the Rastafari Aboriginal ancestry, or Haile Selassie was this type of person, or that type of person, or this type of leader, or that type of leader. And the actual looking at just the facts of the actions that he done, even from an earthly political perspective, is often not really seen. So my father's people was, you know, I guess a sort of rally call, because so many people, you know, they're aware of Sankara, they're aware of Nkrumah, they're aware of Julius Malema, and all of these different leaders. And it was to sort of put in a perspective of not every leader in that song was present at the first summit of the OAU, but it was to put it into that of like, okay, these are all the different people that were spearheading the respective liberation of their respective parts of Africa from the colonial rule. And His Majesty tried to bring all of them together to completely rid the continent of colonial rule. And the timeline in which that happened, and, you know, to see that His Majesty gave that famous address at the United Nations right before, you know, when he's outlining things like, you know, we Africans will fight if necessary, and we're confident in the victory of good, and we know we shall win as we're confident in the victory of good over evil. When you put that into the political timeline of, at the same time he's constructing Africa Hall to assemble this group of leaders, and at the same time, you know, Queen Elizabeth is on a state visit to Ethiopia, and he marches her up the stairs, or doesn't march her, he walks gracefully up the stairs.
Oh.
And she's confronted with the enormous stained glass mural, which I think is called something like the total emancipation of Africa, in the entranceway of Africa Hall. And if you haven't seen it, it's such an epic image.
Wow.
So, yeah, my father's people was a small kind of gesture to try to keep that side of the story also alive, you know, and that's why it was released with a PDF pamphlet to try to show the, you know, this is African liberation history, this is world history, this is political history, this is political science, this is the simultaneous like realms that this was operating in is unprecedented. And then so we released that on May 25th, the anniversary of the founding of the OAU.
Nice. Selassie.
And
where can that PDF be found for listeners? Is it accessible to the public?
I think there's a download link to it in the YouTube credits of the music video. So if one searches My Father's People, they can grab the download link.
Okay.
From the YouTube channel.
Good, thanks. So what kinds of energies and feelings are you able to emit through the sound system?
I see, back to the subject of bass, you know, bass is such a interesting phenomenon, you know, the recreation of bass at that volume so that it becomes a sonic saturated resonant space where everyone is being vibrated at the same frequency as the air around them, as the room or the space that they're within. And I think in, that respect, it starts to become a transpersonal experience because it dissolves this boundary. We're so accustomed to see the boundary of flesh as the boundary between us and the outside world, or as the boundary between us and the other person, and everything is, othered, or and of course we know that boundary is an illusion, but the sound system, the sheer volume of the bass dissolves that boundary, because it's very difficult to maintain a solid identity of self and other when you're in a space, just as when you have a very loving embrace with another person, the boundary between you and that person is dissolved for the duration of the embrace if both parties engage in the embrace with an open heart. Well, sound system is that being enforced, whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not.
Yeah, it's like being blasted through.
Yeah, which is why it comes with immense responsibility. That's why, to go back to your earlier question of why it's important. I mean, it's important because this is no joke. This is, it has always been understood that when one is holding space and holding ceremony, it needs to, sirens. I'll wait for the sirens to finish. It's understood that when one is holding space and holding ceremony, that has to be done with the responsibility that you are going to take people into a place that can give birth to all kind of feelings and behavior and so that has to be done. It doesn't work to do that in a hedonistic way. It doesn't. These things are not compatible. Remind me of the question.
I don't even remember. I was asking what kinds of energies and feelings are you able to the sound system?
Yeah. Every energy, the full spectrum of what it is to be, alive. And that's why I say that it has to be done with responsibility, and especially if sound system is to be a countercultural place. And if we think about its roots, this is a gathering of the oppressed. This is a gathering in its roots, in its inception, of people who have been stripped of identity, stripped of culture, stripped of belonging, subject to brutality over the course of multiple generations, that exist within a climate of brutality and unwelcomeness, and
enough respect. Thank you for bringing these points out.
So to create a gathering now that has a ceremonial energy that starts to dissolve the boundary of self and other, and starts to dissolve some of the things that one might have used as armor to navigate through so many trials and tribulations, that armor has served as a very important protective force for one to navigate through a complex and trialing society. So to be putting people into a place where that armor is going to start to be dissolved has to be done in a very grounded, supportive, and well-constructed, disciplined compassionate and righteous way. And that's why having His Majesty at the core is essential. And I don't see any way that it can work without the absolute magnitude of the ideals that His Imperial Majesty represents. And of course, the gathering is a gathering of kings and queens. And then we have His Majesty and Empress Menen. And the gathering is a gathering of the young and the old. And we see His Majesty reigned for such a long time that we are able to have this, Lij Tafari, right through to Haile Selassie with the crown, right through to a wise, experienced, ancient leader. So with His Majesty as the central pillar, as the spiritual savior for humanity, as the liberator, as the one to, break the chains.
Yes, I open the seven seals.
And that's the central, when I talk about these gatherings, it's like, my early experiences, you walk into a dark room, sound system is set up in a round space. There's tends to be like one single light bulb illuminating just enough light for the selector and operator to find the right record and make sure the needle can be dropped on the record, casting this great light onto a banner of His Majesty. Now that light is an old school filament light bulb that is dimming and illuminating in synchronization to the baseline, because the base energy, electrical energy, is creating a current dip. So when the bass drops, the light dips and it emulates a firelight. So you're going into this dark space, which almost feels like it's lit by firelight. The only thing you can see is the silhouette of the sound system operator, who is like a high priest leading ceremony. And then His Majesty illuminated up on the wall. And then you go in there and you stick through a whole night into the early hours in a room full of people who are mostly sober.
Beautiful.
And that is, how I think that the responsibility was held immaculately, because there it is. There is the tangible example. Are we living up to this ultimate example of His Imperial Majesty or not? And if we're not, fix up, sort yourself out, behave properly, upright, righteous behavior, befitting to a king or a queen. And that permeates through everything. The way you dress, the way you conduct yourself, the way you carry yourself in the space, the way you deal with your fellow brethren or sisterin within the space, the way that if you're an elder, you make sure that the youngers feel safe, the way if you're a younger, you look up to the example of the elders. And that is the sound system gathering, and that's what's under attack and being turned into debaucherous, hedonistic party music.
So very crucial to be holding firm to the foundation and the cornerstone of the true essence of the reggae dub sound system and of Haile Selassie, as the headstone. I'm really grateful for what you're doing and what you're sharing with the world. I listened to your speech or lecture in Portugal recently, and one thing that I enjoyed was you mentioned if you've been at, like a reggae festival or a show where you're up, either, as a DJ or in the crowd, when you've been up all hours of the night, going on minimal sleep, and the example of the selector playing the same rhythm over and over and over, and how that can either bug you out and like make you lose it, or how that can be a meditation and a way to open into this other realm of heights or of meditation. So can you share a little bit about dub music as a form of spiritual practice, like we have yoga or other meditation? How do you see this as a practice?
Well, first of all, I think, dub is a phenomenon. Dub is a process that is done to reggae music. And in that process, it gave birth to the ability for the music to be used as, in this way, as spiritual practice. And I think at this point, I just want to kind of say this is where the paradox for me starts to, or the irony becomes quite evident, because none of this was, consciously set out to happen. The fact that we are having this conversation, or the fact that I feel driven to try to put this into words, is an act to try to preserve it, rather than, otherwise it doesn't need to be put into words, because it was so organic the way it happened. And it was a tangible, lived experience. And the fact that it happened, I think, it just happened, just, I guess, like any spiritual practice happened. I don't think, however yoga came into existence, and however many variations of that sort of, movement-based practices that have occurred simultaneously and spontaneously throughout time, they are like instinctual responses of the people in that, because ultimately that's our greatest instinct, our greatest instinct, contrary to the society that many of us find ourselves within today, and contrary to the way that we're bombarded with all of these distractions. I think, and it seems to be, that regardless of what culture, what faith, what practice, that's our single greatest instinct, is to find a way to experience, what it is to be having an experience of ourself as an embodiment of the infinite. And somehow the process of dub that was pioneered by the greats of King Tubby and Lee Perry and Augustus Pablo took reggae music, totally, didn't even break the rules, just made new rules, just of how to use things like reverb and delay and filters and mixing desks, and done something to recorded music that had never been done before. And, reverb, sound is a living thing. But if we use the word sound describes the thing as an inanimate object, but sound is definitely not an inanimate object. Sound is, a living thing. So if we use a verb to describe it, such as sounding, then we can't escape the fact, that something is sounding and we are in it, and it is us, and it exists because we can hear it, and there's a symbiotic relationship between that vibration and our eardrum and the space around us. So dub was created by using a reverb what a beautiful coincidence. It reverbed it. It made it
Yeah.
into something that could be ceremonially used. You know, repeat. To repeat is the process of an echo. You trigger an echo, it starts to repeat. The etymology of the word repeat is re and petere, which means to seek back.
Oh.
So these are just, you know, mystical happenings or coincidences or whatever you want to say. But there is this process using reverb and delay and resonance, resonance, to go back, sonance, the quality of sound. So resonance, repeat, reverb, all of these things being done as a process to recorded music that allowed that recorded music to then be re-amplified in a sound system in a gathering that started to form this next opportunity. So you have the word, sound, and power of the vocal reggae version. And inside that word, sound, and power is the instructions of, you know, instructions or solace. There is a solace in this our shared experience and, you know, history and helping one to understand. And then you go into the dub, which is a place to reflect and meditate. And then all of these extra effects and components being brought in and brought out and represented in a different way. And that is, I think, what made it created the phenomena that enabled the music to be played in a way that rekindled the ancient ceremonial practice.
Amazing. I just love hearing about all this. I think that at one point, I know in one point of my life, I felt that dub music, it almost felt like a loss of instruments and a loss of the genuine hands-on instruments, until I started to learn more about it and see it as this alchemy and this new, it's like an entire different instrument encompassing all the instruments, and how powerful it is for those producing it to be able to create this. So I just, you know, really love highlighting this and hearing all about it. So you started young, and it seems like you're like a jack of all trades within what you're doing with video, photography, graphic design. How did that all line up for you?
All was born out of the desire to try to give the music the right platform. I love each one of them. I love as a discipline. They're all beautiful disciplines, and I think, you know, creativity obviously knows no bounds, and I've seemed to be quite blessed that I have a mind that can pick up processes quite fast, because all of those disciplines really are just a series of processes to channel whatever creative vision one might have been blessed to have, you know, received into whatever medium. But the proponent for me to have developed those skills is all rooted in wanting the music to have a proper platform. And you know, video was you know, MTV and these things, and we started to see that music videos was an important way to get the music out there. So I taught myself how to film, edit, so that I could make music videos. And then design is an important way to have the album presented. So I taught myself how to design, and then you need a website now. So that came in, and so forth. But I've been asked before what I think connects all of those disciplines. And I think underneath it all really my passion is I'm trying to tell a story all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, whatever medium I can utilize to try to tell that story, I will. And the story at the moment is, that this, not the story, but the desire right now is to get Rastafari reggae music on par with everything else.
Mm.
Because it doesn't need to the industry, I don't want the industry or the mainstream to have any excuse to sidestep the importance of this music.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I don't agree with some of the industry practices, and I don't agree with the sort of objectification and sort of self-righteous hierarchical industry practices, I simultaneously am not going to allow music to be looked over because the album didn't follow industry standard design practices, or the video quality was substandard, or the website that one has to visit to engage in the music feels dated or doesn't load properly, or anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, I think, what motivates me to work across so many disciplines.
It's very inspiring seeing the love of the heart coming out in so many different forms and talents. So, you're an inspiration to the world for sure. You've mastered many areas of music and sound, including performances and videos, all of this. Do you have a direction you're interested in continuing to expand, or do you feel like you've leveled out and mastered what you can?
I don't even feel like I've scratched the surface. I mean, I will humbly and gratefully try to, receive the reflection of your recognition of me having mastered some things. But in truth, I feel like a student at all times. And I hope that never changes, because the potential of everything is essentially infinite. And I just hope that, in all of these mediums and ways that society is changing so rapidly, that we can find a way to maintain the presence of Rastafari reggae music that doesn't compromise its core values. I think it's already a compromise in so many ways. But I hope that compromise can always tilt in a way that the pros outweigh the cons. And that, we can find a way that, as the internet develops and we go into this Web3 thing, and metaverse is going to be the next frontier, and digital music and all of these different things. And, it's already so evident that the commercialization of this is in full effect. And I hope I hope I and we and everyone that feels the same can just maintain a presence in a way that is compassionate, understanding, and yet unrelenting in its conviction to maintain the original core values of the music from its inception.
Give thanks, respect. Is there anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. I mean, there's always more, but what I think we've covered a substantial amount.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I just hope that anyone tuning in, you know, is like, I have no idea what I'm doing in truth, you know. I'm really just trying my best to try to speak as honestly and truthfully as I can in any given moment,
Mm-hmm.
and simultaneously make sure that I'm willing to suffer the consequences of anywhere where I don't speak the truth, or I don't articulate something properly, or I digress from, you know, either my own moral or ethical framework or the moral and ethical framework of, you know, my elders or the people that came before me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope people receive this interview in that spirit, you know, and you know, if there's anything that feels, you know, jarring, that it's grounds on which we just explore it and reason it out and get to it, because you know, I try not to be defensive if people want to critique it, and a lot of the information that I'm presenting is right on the fringe of my understanding. I'm kind of trying to consume information in real time and regurgitate it in real time in the best way that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be a forever ongoing developmental process. And so I hope, you know, people feel inspired to participate in that, and people accept my invitation to criticize it in the spirit of, you know, trying to get somewhere useful.
Absolutely. I hear you loud and clear, and I feel the same way, you know, in my own way. And I just really feel like this is a healing thing, and, you know, forward ever. And, you know, may we walk in the spirit and the light of Haile Selassie and Empress Menen and do the works, and with the respect and the love for all people. You know, I give thanks for this time. It's been, you know, so nice to have you here today. Thank you so much, Jamie. You all have been tuned into Ancient Current Rastafari Roots and Culture. I've had Jamie from Kibir La Amlak, a dub alchemist, holding firm to the spiritual essence of Rastafari in the reggae music. Thank you so much, Jamie. Blessed love and respect.
Rastafari, give thanks for having me on your channel.
Give thanks. Blessed.